The night air was heavy with smoke and noise. Strange lights burned in the alien square, and a cruel crowd gathered to watch the show. In the center, guards dragged something small, weak, and trembling. It was a girl, but not human. Her body thin, her skin cracked and bruised, her eyes empty of light. They threw her into the dirt like a broken toy, laughing as dust covered her face. The human stood there, silent among the aliens. He had come to this place only to trade, only to watch from a distance, but now his eyes locked on the fragile figure before him. The crowd shouted and mocked, telling him this was his prize, his gift, his entertainment for the night. They laughed louder, saying she was useless, a shattered thing, good for nothing but cruel games. The girl did not move. She curled herself smaller, as if waiting for another strike. Her thin arms wrapped around her knees, her body shivered like a leaf in a storm. The human took a step closer, and the crowd roared with excitement. "Go on, human," they shouted. "Show us how you play." But he did not raise his hand. He did not laugh with them. Instead, he bent down slowly, his shadow falling over the girl. He reached out, his hand steady, and touched her trembling shoulder. She flinched hard, expecting pain, expecting another cruel strike. But the touch was gentle, warmer than anything she had felt in years. Her eyes, wide and broken, lifted to meet his. For a moment, everything grew quiet. Even the crowd seemed unsure. Why was the human kneeling? Why was he not laughing? The human whispered softly, his voice steady. "You're safe now." The words carried no cruelty, no command, only kindness. The girl blinked, unable to understand. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her chest rose and fell fast, her breath uneven. She could not believe someone would say those words to her. The aliens around them began to murmur, their mocking laughter turning to uneasy whispers. Is he serious? One spat, "He pities her?" Another growled, "He is wasting his time, she is nothing." But the human did not look away. He slid his arm under her and lifted her gently. She weighed almost nothing, as if her body had been starved too long. Her head rested weakly against his chest, her eyes still full of fear but with the smallest spark of confusion. The crowd jeered louder, anger mixing with their laughter. They called him a fool, a weakling, a disgrace to his kind. They shouted that he would regret this, that protecting her meant his death. But the human stood tall, holding the broken girl against him. His jaw tightened, his eyes hard, yet his grip on her remained gentle. She pressed her face into his shirt, hiding from the crowd, her small hands clutching at the fabric as if it was her only shield. The air grew tense, the laughter faded into threats. One alien hissed, "Throw her away before she drags you down." Another snarled, "She is cursed, she will bring hunters to you." But the human did not move. His voice rose stronger this time. "She is mine to protect now," he said, each word clear like steel. The girl's eyes widened again, a tear sliding down her cheek. No one had ever said such words about her. No one had ever claimed her with kindness instead of cruelty. Her body trembled, but for the first time, the trembling was not only from fear, it was from something she had never known before. Hope. The crowd shifted, some mocking, some angry, others silent. They did not understand why a human would choose to carry broken weight. But deep in the girl's soul, something stirred, something she thought long dead. She whispered faintly, only he could hear. Why are you kind?" Her question struck deeper than any weapon. The human looked at her, his expression steady, because in that moment he knew. He could not let her go, even if the whole world stood against him. Even if death followed, she was no longer a toy, no longer a shattered thing. She was his to protect, his to save. The night crowd still waited for cruelty, still waited for blood. But instead, they witnessed something far more dangerous. A bond, fragile but real, born in the dirt under cruel lights. A human choosing mercy when the galaxy only knew scorn. And in his arms, a broken girl took her first breath of hope. The shelter was small, only stone walls and a broken roof. The human carried the girl inside, his steps slow but firm. She was light in his arms, far too light, as if she was more shadow than flesh. He set her down gently on a piece of cloth, the closest thing to a bed. The girl looked around, her eyes still filled with fear, her body stiff as if she expected chains to fall at any moment. The human knelt beside her, placing a cup of water in her trembling hands. She stared at it as if it was a trick. Her lips parted, her voice cracked like broken glass. "Is this for me?" she whispered. He nodded once, steady. "Drink." The girl raised the cup with weak fingers, spilling more than she swallowed. But each drop that touched her throat seemed to awaken something long asleep inside her. When the water was gone, she coughed softly and lowered the cup. Her voice was quiet, almost like wind. They never gave me water first," she said, her words shaking. The human frowned, his jaw tightening. He wanted to ask, but he stayed silent, letting her speak at her own pace. The silence stretched, filled only by the sound of her shallow breathing. She pulled her knees close again, hugging them to her chest. Her eyes stayed on the dirt floor, afraid to meet his gaze. "I was taken when I was small," she began. "They said I was weak, too weak to be useful. So they used me for games." Her lips trembled, her voice breaking. "They laughed when I cried. They fed me only enough to keep me alive. They called me broken, worthless, a thing to be thrown away." The human's fists clenched, his teeth grinding in anger. He could see the marks on her skin now, scars hidden beneath the dirt, each one telling a story of cruelty. But he did not interrupt. He let her words fall, each one cutting deeper than any blade. Her breath shook as she continued. "They told me no one would ever want me, that I was less than dirt, that if I ever begged for kindness I would be punished." She paused, swallowing hard. "So I stopped begging. I stopped hoping." Her eyes lifted slightly, finally meeting his, her gaze heavy with pain. "And then they threw me to you just to see you laugh at me." The human leaned closer, his voice low, steady. "I will never laugh at you." The girl flinched, as if kindness was sharper than cruelty. She blinked fast, her eyes shining with tears she did not want to show. "Why?" she whispered, her voice almost breaking. "Why would you say that? Why would you care?" He had no easy answer, no speech to give. He only knew the truth in his heart. "Because no one deserves what they did to you," he said firmly. His words carried weight, a strength that wrapped around her like unseen armor. The girl's tears finally fell, rolling down her bruised cheeks. Her small hands gripped the cloth under her, as if afraid she would be punished for crying. But no hand struck her. No voice mocked her, only silence and warmth filled the space. Her tears fell faster, not from pain this time, but from the strange, sharp ache of being seen. The human reached into his pack and pulled out a small piece of bread. He placed it in front of her, his hand moving slowly, gently. She stared at it as if it were gold. Her fingers trembled when she picked it up. She brought it to her lips, hesitating before finally taking a small bite. Her eyes closed, and for the first time in years, a sound escaped her lips. Soft, broken, but real. A sob of relief. The human's chest tightened, anger and sorrow mixing in his heart. How could the galaxy be so cruel that bread and water felt like miracles to her? How could they throw away a life so precious, so fragile, and laugh? She wiped her face quickly, ashamed of her tears. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I should not cry." But the human shook his head, his voice steady. "You are allowed to cry. You are allowed to feel. No one can take that from you." Her lips trembled, her tears falling again. But this time she did not hide them. For the first time she let herself cry without shame. The sound of her sobs filled the small shelter, and the human sat there, not touching, not speaking, just staying. Beside her like a wall against the world. Outside, the alien crowd had dispersed, but whispers would spread. They would say the human was foolish, that he had chosen weakness, but inside the shelter, something else was happening. A broken girl was taking her first steps toward healing, and a human had decided, no matter what, he would not let her be broken again. The girl's voice came soft, fading as sleep pulled her down. "Why are you kind?" she whispered once more. The human watched her close her eyes, her small body curling into fragile rest. He gave no answer this time, only kept watch as shadows stretched long, because he knew the answer was simple, yet heavy. He could not stand a world that left her in pieces, and he would fight anyone who tried to shatter her again. The night was restless even when the girl finally closed her eyes. The human sat awake, his back against the cold stone wall, watching the broken roof where faint moonlight poured through. His mind was not quiet. He could hear voices outside, whispers moving through the streets. He knew kindness had a cost, and soon that cost would come knocking. The girl stirred in her sleep, her face pressed against the rough cloth, her breathing shallow but calmer than before. She looked fragile, but for the first time, she looked less like a ghost and more like a child who had finally tasted peace. The human clenched his fists, his jaw tight. He promised himself that no one would take this small piece from her. The sound came at dawn, heavy boots, rough laughter, voices filled with cruelty. The crowd had returned, but this time not just to laugh. This time they brought hunters, armored aliens, tall and merciless with blades shining in the morning light. They stopped in front of the shelter, their shadows covering the doorway. One of them called out, his voice sharp like a whip, "Human, throw out the broken one. She is not yours to keep." The girl woke with a start, her body trembling as the words reached her ears. She scrambled backward, pressing herself into the corner, her eyes wide with terror. "No," she whispered. "They came back." The human stood slowly, his figure blocking the doorway. His heart pounded, but his voice came out steady. "She is not yours anymore," he said firmly. "She is mine to protect now." The hunters laughed, their voices cruel. "You think you can keep her? She is worthless. She was thrown to you for fun, nothing more." One of them stepped closer, his blade catching the light. "If you do not throw her away, you will die with her." The girl shook her head, her small hands clutching her own arms. Her voice came weak, almost broken. "Please, just give me back. They will kill you." Tears filled her eyes, her body shaking. "I am not worth this. No one is worth this." But the human turned his head, his gaze locking on her. His words came out strong, not just for her to hear, but for the hunters too. "You are worth it," he said, each word cutting like steel. The girl's breath caught in her throat. Her tears froze. She had never heard those words before. Not once in her life. The hunters growled, anger flashing in their eyes. They circled, him, ready to strike. But he did not move. He did not step aside. He stood like a wall, his body shielding the girl from their blades. One hunter sneered, "You will regret this, human, by sunrise. You will beg for death." They left then, their laughter echoing through the street, a promise of the violence to come. The girl collapsed to her knees, covering her face. Her sobs filled the small shelter, her voice breaking. "They will kill you. They will kill us both. Why are you doing this?" The human knelt beside her, lifting her chin gently. Her eyes were wet red with fear. He spoke slowly, firmly. "Because you are alive. And that is enough reason for me." She trembled, unable to understand such words. Her lips moved, whispering, "But I am broken." The human shook his head, his voice strong. "No, they only want you to believe that, but I see more in you than they ever will." Her tears spilled again, but this time they carried something different. Not only fear, but confusion, a small spark of something fragile. Hope. Outside, the whispers grew louder, spreading through the streets. The human knew what this meant. The hunters would not let this go. By nightfall, they would come back, and they would not come alone. The girl sat beside him, hugging her knees, her voice shaking. "You should run. Leave me. They will not chase you if you leave me behind." But the human placed his hand on her shoulder, steady and firm. "I will not run," he said, his voice calm like stone. "They can come, they can threaten, but I will not give you back." The girl stared at him, her lips trembling. She could not believe it. Yet his eyes carried no lies, only fire. The day passed in silence, both waiting, both knowing what was coming. The girl sat close to him, her fear pressing against her chest. But even in her fear, her heart began to change. If he could face death for her, then maybe she was not as worthless as she had been told. The sky turned red as the sun fell. The sound of drums echoed in the distance, the hunters gathering. The human tightened his grip on the small blade he carried. The girl's small hand touched his sleeve. Trembling, her whisper came soft, almost a plea. "Promise me you will live." The human looked at her, his expression unshaken. "I promise we will live," he said. And as the shadows of hunters closed in, the promise became more than words. It became his truth. The sun had set, and the shelter grew colder with the night. The human sat close to the doorway, his blade resting across his lap, his eyes never leaving the dark streets outside. The alien girl sat behind him, her knees pulled tight to her chest, her small body trembling even though he had given her his cloak. The silence between them was heavy, but not empty, it carried both fear and a fragile bond growing stronger with every passing hour. She watched his back, his broad shoulders outlined in the faint glow of the moon. There was no fear in his stance, only steady calm, as if he had chosen this path long before the hunters had appeared. Her lips parted, her voice came out weak. "You should sleep, you need strength." He shook his head slowly, his eyes still fixed on the shadows. "Strength comes from more than sleep," he said, his voice steady. "Knowing what I fight for gives me more strength than rest ever will." The girl's eyes lowered, her fingers twisting the edge of his cloak. "Why do you fight for me?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "You could have left me like the others, no one would blame you." The human turned his head slightly, his gaze softening as he looked at her. "I fight because no one else will," he said simply. "And because you deserve more than chains, more than fear." Her breath caught, her chest rising unevenly. Tears burned in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She wanted to believe him, but the weight of years of cruelty pressed heavy on her heart. Her voice cracked again. "I am not worth saving." But his answer came quick, sharp and firm. "You are wrong, you are worth everything." The words struck her like fire. Her lips trembled. She covered her face with her hands, trying to hide the storm inside her. For the first time in her life, someone spoke of her as if she mattered, not as a burden, not as trash, but as someone worth standing for. The feeling was strange, painful, yet warm, and it terrified her more than the hunters waiting in the dark. The wind blew cold through the broken roof. The girl shivered, her thin body unable to fight the chill. The human noticed, his jaw tightening. He shifted, pulling her closer and wrapping the cloak around her shoulders. She stiffened at first, unused to touch that did not hurt. But slowly, her body relaxed, her head leaning gently against his arm. "You are shaking," he said softly. She nodded, whispering, "I am cold and I am scared." His arm tightened slightly around her. "Then stay close and know that you are not alone anymore." Her eyes closed, the warmth of his words seeping into her like light through cracks in a wall. For years she had slept on stone floors, chained and starved, surrounded by cruel laughter. Now she was wrapped in warmth, guarded by someone who did not see her as broken. Her heart ached with confusion, but also with something she had never dared to feel: hope. Outside, footsteps echoed faintly. The hunters had not forgotten. They were waiting for the right moment to strike. The human's grip tightened on his blade, his body tense but ready. He whispered more to himself than to her. "They will come soon." The girl's eyes opened again, fear returning quickly. Her small hand reached for his sleeve, clutching it tightly. "Do not leave me," she pleaded, her voice trembling. He looked down at her, his eyes steady. "I will never leave you," he promised. The night grew deeper and danger pressed closer, but inside that broken shelter something unshakable had begun to form. The girl shifted slightly, her head resting against his shoulder now, her body still weak, but her soul beginning to find strength from his presence. For the first time she whispered words she never thought she would say. "Thank you." The human's chest tightened at her voice. It was not much, only 2 words, but they carried more weight than any treasure in the galaxy. He gave a small nod, though he knew she could not see it. "You do not need to thank me," he said quietly, but she shook her head faintly. "No one has ever treated me like this. No one has ever given me kindness, not even once. I have to thank you." Her voice faded as her exhaustion pulled her down. Her breathing slowed, her small body leaning fully against him. The human stayed still, letting her rest, even as his eyes stayed fixed on the doorway. He could not rest. Not yet. Not with hunters moving in the shadows, but her warmth against his side gave him a strength he had never known. He realized then that saving her body was not enough. He had to save her spirit too, and that battle would be even harder than any fight with blades. The night stretched on, every sound outside sharp, every whisper of wind carrying danger, but inside, a fragile peace settled for the first time. The girl, once treated as worthless, slept safely against someone who refused to let her go. And the human, once only a stranger, became her shield, her warmth, and her only hope. As the fire of dawn began to glow faintly on the horizon, the hunters prepared for war, but so did the human, because now it was no longer just about survival. It was about a promise whispered in the dark, that she would never be broken again. The first rays of dawn stretched across the alien streets. The silence before sunrise was heavy, but it did not last. The ground shook with steady footsteps, the sound of armor striking against stone. Voices filled with cruelty echoed, and the hunters returned stronger and angrier than before. The human rose from where he had been sitting, his blade in hand, his body sore but steady. The girl woke to the sound, her eyes wide with fear, her body trembling against the cloak he had wrapped around her. "They are here," she whispered, her voice breaking. Her hands clutched at his sleeve, her eyes begging him to leave. "Please, run before they kill you." But the human shook his head, his eyes fixed on the shadows outside the doorway. "I told you I will not run," he said firmly. "They want to break you again, but I will not allow it." The girl's tears spilled, her lips shaking. "They will hurt you like they hurt me. They will tear you apart." The first hunter stepped into view, tall and armored, his blade sharp and dripping with strange green liquid. His voice boomed across the shelter. "Human, step aside. Give us the broken one. She is cursed, she belongs to us." The human stood in the doorway, his figure blocking the entrance completely. "She belongs to no one," he said, his voice deep and steady. "She is free, and she is mine to protect." The hunters laughed, their cruel voices echoing like thunder. "Protect?" one sneered. "You cannot even protect yourself." Another raised his weapon, pointing it at the girl trembling inside. "She is weak. She will bring you nothing but death. Give her back, and maybe we will let you live." The girl gasped, hiding, her face, her heart pounding in her chest. Her mind screamed at her to crawl to them, to surrender, to save him from danger. But her body would not move. Her heart clung to the promise he had made. Her voice shook as she whispered, "Why do you fight for me? Why won't you let me go?" The human's jaw tightened, his grip firm on his blade. He turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting hers. "Because you are not broken," he said. "You only believe what they told you, but I see you, and I will fight until you see yourself too." The hunters roared, anger flashing in their eyes. With a signal they rushed forward, their blades raised, their voices sharp with the promise of blood. The human met them head on, his blade clashing with steel sparks flying in the dim morning light. The sound of battle filled the air. Metal against metal, shouts against silence. The girl covered her ears, tears running down her face. She wanted to close her eyes, but she could not. She forced herself to watch. Each strike he made was not for himself, but for her. Every move he took pushed the hunters back. Every breath he drew carried the fire of his promise. The hunters mocked him between blows. "Why die for trash? One spat. But the human answered with his blade, his strikes sharper, stronger. "I do not die for trash," he growled. "I fight for life." One hunter's blade cut across his arm, blood spilling quickly. The girl screamed, crawling forward. On her knees, "Stop! Please stop, you will die." But the human did not fall. He pushed forward again, striking hard, sending the hunter crashing against the stone wall. His body bled, but his spirit did not break. The girl's tears mixed, with dirt on her cheeks, her small voice shaking. "Why? Why would you hurt yourself for me?" The human's eyes burned with fire as he fought. "Because you are worth more than their cruelty," he shouted. "You are not what they say. You are not broken. You are alive, and that is enough." The hunters faltered at his words, confusion flashing through their cruel faces. The girl's heart pounded, her chest burning with something new. Hope, raw and fragile, but real. For the first time, she saw herself through his eyes, not as shattered, but as someone who deserved to stand. The battle raged on, blood on stone, blades striking hard. The human staggered once, but his stance never failed. The girl cried out, her voice rising above the clash. "Please do not die, you cannot leave me now." Her words gave him strength, his arm rising once more, his blade cutting with desperate fire. At last, the hunters pulled back, snarling, "This is not the end." "Human," their leader growled. "We will return and you both will suffer." They vanished into the shadows, their promise heavy in the morning air. The human dropped to one knee, his breath heavy, his arm bleeding. The girl crawled to him, her small hands pressing against his wound, tears falling fast. "You cannot fight them again. You will die," she cried. But he lifted his hand, placing it gently against her cheek. "I will fight as many times as I must, until you believe you are not broken," he whispered. Her tears spilled harder, her body shaking. For the first time, she pressed her forehead against his chest, sobbing not from pain, but from something deeper. For the first time, she believed him even just a little. The hunters would return stronger than before. But so would the human's will, because the battle was no longer only about survival. It was about saving her soul. The morning air was heavy with the smell of blood. The human leaned against the wall of the shelter, his arm wrapped in cloth. The wound deep but not enough to break him. The alien girl sat beside him, her small hands trembling as she tried to tie the fabric tighter, her tears falling on his skin. "You should not fight anymore," she whispered, her voice broken. "They will come back stronger, and you will die for me." The human shook his head slowly, his eyes steady even through the pain. "I told you before," he said firmly. "Your life is worth protecting." She pressed her lips together, her heart pounding with confusion. Her voice cracked as she asked, "Why me? Why not leave me like the others did?" He turned his gaze toward her, his jaw tight but his eyes gentle. "Because I see what they cannot," he replied. "They see weakness, but I see strength waiting to rise." Her chest tightened, her breath shallow. She wanted to believe him, but the years of pain wrapped chains around her soul. Her voice shook as she whispered, "But I am broken." The human leaned forward, his face close to hers. "No," he said firmly. "You were broken by them, but that is not who you are. You are more than the scars they left." Her eyes filled again, but this time her tears did not fall from fear. They came from something new, something warm and terrifying. She looked at him and whispered, "You speak as if I matter." His hand lifted slowly, brushing the dirt from her cheek. "You do matter," he said softly, "and one day you will believe it too." Before she could answer, a sound echoed from the streets. The hunters had returned, their voices sharp and cruel. The girl gasped, her body freezing, her eyes wide. "They are here," she whispered. "Please hide, they will kill you this time." The human stood, his blade in his hand once more. Blood still dripped from his arm, but his stance was strong, his spirit unshaken. The hunters stormed the shelter, their leader snarling, "This ends now, human. Give us the girl or we will tear you apart." The human stepped forward, his body shielding her once again. "No," he said, his voice ringing like iron. "She is not yours. She will never be." "Yours again?" The fight erupted, steel clashing against steel. The human swung his blade with fury, his movements fueled not by strength alone but by something deeper. The girl cried out, watching him struggle, blood staining the ground. Her heart ached, her body trembling. She could not sit still any longer. Without thinking, she ran forward, throwing herself between him and the hunters. Her small frame stood in front of his, her arms spread wide. "Stop," she cried, her voice stronger than ever before. "You will not take him from me. You will not break him like you broke me." The hunters paused, their blades raised but their eyes filled with shock. The girl's voice rose, louder, fierce. "For so long I believed your lies. I believed I was nothing. I believed I was broken, but he showed me the truth." She turned her head slightly, her tear-streaked face looking back at the human. "I belong here, with him, and no one will take that from me." The human's chest tightened, his breath caught. He had fought with blades and strength, but her words cut deeper than any weapon. For the first time, she was fighting too. Not with steel, but with her soul. The hunters growled, confused and angry. Their leader snarled, "She is still worthless, she is still weak." But the girl shouted back, her voice fierce and unbroken. "No, I am not worthless. Not anymore. I am alive, and I choose him." The human moved forward, his blade flashing with new strength. Beside him, her defiance gave him power greater than before. He struck hard, his wounds screaming with pain, but his spirit soaring. Together they forced the hunters back, their bond unshakable. The hunters retreated once more, their leader spitting on the ground. "This is not finished, human. We will return again," he growled. Then they vanished into the shadows, leaving the air heavy with silence. The girl collapsed to her knees, her body trembling, but not from fear this time. Her tears fell freely, her chest rising fast. The human knelt beside her, his hand steady on her shoulder. "You were brave," he whispered, his voice soft but filled with pride. She looked up at him, her lips trembling. "I was not brave alone," she whispered. "You gave me strength." Their eyes locked, the silence between them filled with something unspoken. Not just protector and protected, but something deeper, a bond forged in pain and defiance and hope. The girl placed her hand over his, her voice steady though soft. "Do not call me broken anymore," she said, "because now—" "I believe you." The human gave a small nod, his heart heavy but full. Together they sat in the ruined shelter, the dawn light shining on their faces. The hunters would come again, stronger and fiercer. But now they were not just one human and one shattered girl. Now they were bound by something greater, a bond of souls, stronger than fear, stronger than cruelty, and together, they were ready to face whatever came next. The sun rose slowly over the alien streets, painting the broken walls in pale light. The human sat near the doorway, his body wounded, his strength tested, but his eyes still alive with fire. Beside him, the girl rested, her head against his arm, her breath soft but steady. For the first time in years, her face was not twisted in fear. It was calm, touched by the faintest smile. She stirred awake, blinking against the morning glow. Her small body was still weak, but her eyes carried something new, a spark that had not been there before. When she looked at him, she did not see just a shield. She saw someone who believed in her when no one else did. Her lips parted, her voice came soft. "You kept your promise." The human turned to her, his jaw tight from pain but his expression gentle. "I told you," he said firmly. "I will never leave you." Her tears welled again, but they were not the same as before. They were not tears of despair. This time they were warm, alive, carrying the weight of gratitude she could not put into words. She sat up slowly, her hands trembling. Her gaze dropped to the scars across her arms, old wounds that once reminded her of chains. But when she touched them now, she thought of his words. "You are not broken." Her lips trembled as she whispered, to herself, I am not broken. The human reached out, his hand steady as he touched her shoulder. You believed their lies for too long, he said softly. But now you see, you are more than what they made you. Her chest tightened, her voice cracking. You did not just save me from them, you saved me from myself. The air was quiet, but not for long. In the distance, the sound of drums began again, hunters gathering once more. The girl flinched, her body stiffening, but this time she did not crawl away. She turned to him, her small hand gripping his sleeve. Will they ever stop? She asked, her voice heavy with dread. The human looked toward the horizon, his eyes narrowing. They may never stop, he admitted, but neither will I. Her heart pounded at his words, not with fear but with pride. For the first time, she felt the fire he carried begin to burn inside her too. She wiped her tears, her face firm. Then I will not stop either, she whispered. Her words surprised even her, but they carried truth. The human studied her, his chest swelling with quiet pride. You are stronger than you think, he said. She gave a small nod, her eyes shining. Because you showed me how. As the day stretched forward, they prepared for what might come. The human sharpened his blade, his movement slow but steady despite his wounds. The girl sat beside him, no longer hiding in the corner. She watched him, learning, her fingers tightening around a small, broken stick she had found. It was nothing compared to steel, but in her hands it felt like courage. Hours passed, and the hunters never came. Perhaps they were waiting. Perhaps they were afraid. But in that silence, something greater than battle took root. The girl spoke again, her voice soft but strong. They laughed when they threw me to you. They said I was nothing but fun. But you gave me back my soul. Her words caught in her throat, tears falling again. Why would you do that? Why me? The human set his blade down and turned to her. His hand rested gently over hers, steady and warm. Because life is not a toy, he said firmly. Because every soul deserves to be seen, and you were hidden too long. Her heart ached at his words, her tears falling freely now. She pressed her forehead against his chest, her voice muffled. You saved me, not just my body, but everything inside me. The human's arm wrapped around her, holding her close. He did not speak, but his silence carried more than words. It carried the truth she had longed for, the truth that she was no longer alone. The sun climbed higher, and though danger still lingered, hope grew stronger. The girl sat beside him, her small hand never letting go of his. She no longer looked like the shattered figure thrown in the dirt. She sat taller, her eyes brighter, her heart steadier. And for the first time, she whispered words not of fear, but of strength. I am not broken anymore. The human smiled faintly, the corners of his lips lifting. No, you are not, he agreed, his voice steady. You are whole and you are free. The hunters would return. The battles were not over. But the girl knew now that no matter what they faced, she was not the same as before. She was no longer the shattered soul mocked by the crowd. She was the soul he saved, and with him beside her, she was ready to face the galaxy.